sure that I'm doing this the right way. Good morning, everybody. I am so happy to be here with all of you today. I'm very grateful to the R Foundation for this invitation. Thank you to Karen and to Amanda and Sarah and Marissa, and especially to Natasha, Dr. Ludwig, who was actually the one who said, hey, you should come to our conference and talk. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to come and share my story and then hopefully share how your stories are really leading the way to treatments for your children. So I might talk a little fast because I don't want to put you guys behind. But I know many of you here are here because of somebody with a rare disease, and so am I. It's a different disease, but this is my whoops. This is my son, Alex. And as Sarah said, he was diagnosed with a rare disease, a CACNA1A related disorder, in December of 2021 when he was just 6 years old. He was born without any problems, but soon we could see that he started missing developmental milestones, or he just took a really long time to get there. And in the beginning, my husband and I, and even Alex's care team just assumed, he'll catch up, right? He's just a little bit slow. He's going to catch up. But it became apparent as he grew older and older that that gap between him and his peers was widening, and it was continuing to widen. And so something else was going on. But, when we got that rare disease diagnosis, it kind of felt like an answer with no answers, right? Alex had a pathogenic mutation in the CACNA1A gene, which is important for brain communication, but none of his care team knew what that was. And when we asked the doctors, well, what do we do now? They told us, just keep doing what you're doing. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and nothing else. So at this point, I had been a stay-at-home mom for a few years, and I thought I had left my science and my research days behind. So obviously, I had to dust off my science hat, went into the scientific literature, and I learned that there were no treatments for CACNA1A-related disorders. There was no cure. And I remember Googling CACNA1A and lifespan, because isn't that what you do when your kid is diagnosed with a rare disease? For us, though, there was a sliver of hope because the CACNA1A Foundation had just been established in March of 2020. And so in lieu of having any treatments, we had a community, we had a place to belong to in this isolation of having a child with a rare disease. And then they took a chance on me, and I became their science engagement director in 2022 in the summer. And I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to do as a science director. And I quickly learned that this road to treatments that we all talk about is much more complicated, much more complex than I ever imagined it would be. And at times it felt impossible. It felt overwhelming, and it felt like we would never get there. But what I didn't realize in the beginning, and what I realize now, and what I want all of you to realize, is that you all have this power to make the change that you want to make. You have the power because you are the most important part of this mission. The road to the pathway to treatments, it starts with you. Treatments for the ASXL community is going to require this deep understanding of all of the ASXL related diseases. And so who better to pave that pathway than you guys by sharing your experience and sharing your stories? Because stories equal data, and data drives research. And research is what brings these treatments. And once those treatments had advanced to the point of getting to clinical trials, it comes right back to all of you, right? Because these clinical trials need you to enroll and need you to show that this treatment works. So I'm not here to tell you how to do that because you're in great hands. I just spent the last 2 days at the research symposium with the clinicians and the researchers and with Karen, your CSO, and things are moving forward. But what I am here to tell you, although I'm very impressed with how much engagement you guys have with the researchers and the research studies, but to remind you to share your stories and remind you to become stay an active partner on this pathway to treatments and clinical trials for ASXL related disorders. So really, right, why share your story? If we're going to treat a rare disease, we need to understand everything about it. And it is important to understand what symptoms arise with specific variants. And then are there patterns that can help predict if a variant is going to be pathogenic? Is it going to be mild, recurrent, and so on? And all of this information is going to guide research. It's going to decide where research should continue, where it should start, and even where it should stop, right? Um, it's also going to help you as parents figure out which treatments are going to work for your child and for which clinical trials your child will be eligible. And a lot of that also depends on how this disease changes over time. Because here's the thing, right? When you continue to collect longitudinal data, this data over time, it helps everybody realize and understand how symptoms are changing, which guides how treatments are going to change. We know that these diseases are not static, right? Our children are changing, sometimes every day, and that's going to determine what treatments are going to be needed. So don't forget to share your story. And I know that sometimes it can be overwhelming to think about all these surveys and all these studies that you have to do. But we really want to think about quality data over quantity, right? So if you don't know what you're supposed to do, ask the foundation, right? Ask the researchers, the clinicians, ask Karen, which one should you focus on? Because quality data means that you come back year after year and you update your information, you update these studies rather than answering one study one year, and then the next year you do another study. We need this consistency. Um, and then also find a way to participate in studies that are sponsored by the foundation. And the reason why is that then your stories can be leveraged. They could be licensed to a pharma company one day or a drug developer, and that can help bring in money because we all need money, right? We all understand how hard it is to raise money for rare disease research. We see donor fatigue all over the place, and we always ask too much of all of you. So support foundation-sponsored studies when they arise. Here. Share your story and improve quality of life. I know that sounds really basic, but that's why we're all here, right? Not just to improve quality of life of your child, but of you as caregivers and of your entire family. And researchers and drug developers do care about how this disease impacts their families because it tells them what symptoms are the hardest to overcome and what daily activities are constant struggles. Because this identifies what symptoms to go after to target for treatments, and it also makes sure that these treatments are meaningful to you and your family. So share your stories with the research community through any means possible, especially at this conference, because it helps shape the research agenda and clinical care. And caregiver reported priorities were discussed during the research symposium. So your stories are being shared and they are being heard. And something that we've always struggled with is what to prioritize, right? With CACNA1A related disorders, it's like we have multiple diseases in one gene, and they can present very differently. And for the ASXL community, you have multiple or similar diseases, right, but in multiple genes. And it's simply not feasible. And I wish it was feasible. So does Karen, right? To go after everything at once. But sometimes the best path forward is to sort of take a look at what's feasible for clinical trials, because not all symptoms are going to translate into a clinical trial, even if it doesn't impact everybody. And I know that's hard to hear. But the thing is, once you get an ASXL related treatment through clinical trials, you're showing, and it's a successful trial, it shows the FDA that these diseases are treatable. And that is key. And that's going to open the door for innovation, right? The FDA is going to say, let's look and see what else is coming down the pipeline for these diseases. So share your stories, even if there isn't a clinical trial that's coming up that meets your needs, because you never know when that next clinical trial is going to come around the corner that's going to meet your needs. Share your story to build the research tools that are needed. You already have a really good start. You've got this wonderful biobank with samples from all three diseases, but because there are three diseases, you will likely need more. But I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have these tools directly from someone who's living with the disease. And this allows researchers to try to connect the disease mechanisms, what's happening at that cellular level, right? What are those little molecules doing? And connect those to the symptoms that are important, right? And if those symptoms all happen to be, if multiple symptoms happen to be related to one disease mechanism, that can be targeted, right? To treat multiple disease or multiple symptoms at once and to improve them and maybe even one day stop them. Researchers and clinicians are smart people. They will eventually, and they could eventually figure out which variants are pathogenic and what the symptoms are that are associated with them, but it's going to go a whole lot faster if you just tell them, right? And these variants can, some of these variants can be engineered into different animal models for different reasons, right? Depending on the needs of your community. But important thing is that your stories are going to help choose the models that will lead to what we call proof of concept studies. These are the studies, the experiments that are going to show that this treatment that you're testing works on the disease in an animal model. Because that's what the FDA, or sorry, that's what the FDA, but that's also what drug companies and pharma companies are looking for. That's what they're interested in. So if you have that, they're going to want to talk to you. So share your stories to drive research forward, because this can help design a clear strategy to go forward. But it can be flexible because your stories are changing, right? Your stories are helping to choose, again, tools that represent the spectrum of the disease. They allow the foundation to figure out which tools to invest in that could advance multiple projects at one time, because we all know time is limited. We all know funding is limited. So you want to be efficient, right, with your stories. And last but not least, this came up during the research symposium, right? To make these models and tools accessible so that anybody who wants to study ASXL related disorders can obtain them. Sharing these tools, sharing data, sharing your stories, that is really truly how research is accelerated. Now, this might seem far away, clinical trials, but you got to start now, right? You share your story to help inform clinical trial design. Companies are often thinking, okay, how do you quantify this disease, right? How do you measure change? And so how do you detect this disease? Well, we know genetic testing is always a possibility, but it's also helpful to know if there are biomarkers, right? What are these sometimes physical or molecular traits that are only seen in those living with ASXL-related disorders and not in those who don't have the disease? Because how do you know if a treatment works? Well, maybe you can look for a change in these biomarkers. Are there scales or assessments that can be used? We call those outcome measures, and that's what you're all here to do too, to help validate them. Because there are a lot of outcome measures that are already available, but the key is they need to work for your community. They have to work for your kids, and they have to show meaningful endpoints, meaningful change for you and your families. So again, share your stories by participating in these clinical studies. There's the natural history studies, the behavioral phenotyping study, there's Simon Searchlights. I know I'm making it sound very overwhelming right now, but I get it. As a parent, I still have emails in my inbox that say, hey, come back and fill out this survey. I started the Vineland 2 weeks ago and I have not gone back to finish it. I will, right, when I have the time. So remember, you don't have to do everything, but you've got to do something, right? Especially if you want these clinical trials to focus on what's important to you. So share your stories and figure out the best studies or the best surveys that are going to do that. And again, you're going to validate these endpoints and these outcome measures, because here's the key. You could have the perfect drug that you know works in this mouse model. But if you don't have a good way to show change in actual people and show that it's significant change, that trial is going to fail. So help validate those endpoints and those outcome measures. And sharing your stories also helps collect this baseline data. It's really helpful to know, where is your child now before there's a clinical trial, because sometimes that information, your stories, can be used as a reference point for after a treatment. So share your stories. Partnering with pharma companies is something that really can accelerate moving a treatment from an academic setting all the way to clinical trials. But it depends on you, because one of the first questions that we get asked when we talk to pharma is, well, how many people have this disease and how old are they and where do they live? Because these companies, they are invested in this target population that they're looking at. They're trying to figure out, where can potential clinical trial sites be? And you want to let them know, I have it wrong if they're, do the benefits of these treatments and these clinical trials outweigh the risks? So when, these, oh, Go. So when that family research engagement survey comes around or something similar comes around, please fill it out so that companies can know that it's really hard to travel because your child is severe, or that you cannot afford to take off days from work or weeks or sometimes months because that may be required. I want you to keep your voice at the forefront because companies want to know, or they want to make sure that their clinical trials succeed, right? They do care about this. They want to make sure that these trials are feasible for all of you and that they work for you. So educate yourselves. Oops. Educate yourselves and the community, not just about what types of treatments are out there, but also what types of routes of administration are there. I think that's something that we are now trying to ask our families. What level of risk are you comfortable with? Because what if that treatment requires drilling a hole in your child's skull so they can inject something into the brain? Or are you okay with an oral medication that can treat multiple symptoms at once, right? That is going to change too. But you got to tell these companies what you want now. And you can use these stories to engage with pharma early and often. You got to drill this into their knowledge because guess what? They also have a stake in this. Share your stories to promote collaboration. I know I'm kind of over here, but collaboration with that or with your research network. We always have these research roundtables, very, similar to what the R Foundation is doing with the research symposium. And it's really the best way to bring together the researchers and the clinicians and potential pharma partners to really focus on our mission. And we always feature a family story because that's what makes the most impact. So I'm going to show you a really quick video, I think.
Meeting them, hearing about their stories, really seeing what these conditions look like beyond the lab, and all the daily challenges, the uncertainties. It really changes, the perspective, and and it has definitely changed mine.
I've gone to scientific meetings at the CACNA1A Foundation, which have been fantastic.
Working with this group of people in the network has been both inspiring and has been tremendous help for the way that I think of this problem.
I love this foundation so much. I mean, this gene, this disorder, these patients are pretty much what I'm establishing my research program on. And so it's going to be something that I will hopefully be able to explore for the next 10, 20 years until I retire. My research statement was just dripping with CACNA1A because that is who I am as a scientist.
When you meet families and you see some of the children, it gives you a renewed sense of purpose. It just raises the level of urgency that we have to go back in the lab and try and come up with a solution for a devastating problem.
So I know that this was a film from our research network, but I can promise you
meeting them.
That your research network feels the same way about all of you. So I'm going to probably skip a couple more slides, but I think really importantly, lastly, most importantly, you're sharing your stories to build community. Okay, the slides aren't working. This was a picture from our very first conference in 2022, and this is what happened 2 years later. So even though my child didn't have a treatment at the time of his disorder, there was a community that understood everything that I was going through, and that was enough at that time, right? And you have it here. I'm going to skip this next video, but this is essentially what our families told us, right? The foundation gives you a place to belong, and the same thing can be said for all of you here. So this is the power that you hold. You get to shape the narrative of your child and of the disease because you can't control how your child is developing. You can't control how the disease is going to change, but you get to shape the narrative. I remember a few years ago when I started working for the foundation, and my older son Gabriel said to me, "Why are you always trying to fix Alex? I love him the way he is. And if you fix him, is he still going to be this funny?" And I thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, what am I saying? How am I portraying my child to everybody? Because Alex is not something that is broken, that needs to be fixed. Your children are not broken. They do not need to be fixed. They are human beings who deserve to thrive in this world just like everybody else. So my point is, my point is that you should share your stories, but share every aspect of it. Yes, there's the bad, but share the good. There are the lows, but share the highs because you humanize rare disease. You inspire the research network. Work is progressing. I know it seems slow. It can be slow sometimes, but it is moving forward. And it will continue to move forward if you keep speaking up, if you keep advocating. Please do not burn out. Continue to share your stories, share the urgency, share the hope, and go out and change the world together. Thank you.